Commander Jake Sullivan wiped sweat from his forehead as he stood on the rocky surface of planet Kepler 442c. The red sun hung low in the alien sky, casting long shadows across the barren landscape. His team had been digging for 3 weeks now, and what they found made no sense at all. "Sir, you need to see this," called Lisa Morgan from the excavation pit. She was the team's best archaeologist, and her voice carried a note of excitement that made Jake hurry down the metal steps they had installed. The pit was 20 feet deep now, carved into what looked like natural rock, but Lisa was pointing at something that definitely was not natural. Smooth metal panels covered in strange symbols stretched across the entire wall they had uncovered. "What do you think it is?" Jake asked, though he had a growing suspicion that made his stomach feel tight. "It's a building, sir, or part of one. These panels are made from some kind of metal I've never seen before. The symbols look almost like writing, but not from any known alien species." Captain Ryan Davis climbed down to join them. He was their military historian, brought along because this planet was supposed to have been an early human colony. The records showed humans had settled here about 200 years ago, but the colony had failed after just a few decades. "Commander, we have a problem," Ryan said quietly. "I've been running analysis on the metal samples Lisa sent up. The computer says this metal doesn't match anything in our databases. More importantly, the dating shows this structure is at least 5,000 years old." Jake felt his blood turn cold. "That's impossible. Humans didn't even have space travel 5,000 years ago. We were still fighting with swords and horses back then." Lisa brushed dirt away from more symbols. "Sir, look at these markings. They're definitely not alien. The mathematical concepts behind them, the way they're arranged, even the basic structure follows human thinking patterns. I've studied alien writing for 15 years, and this is definitely human." The three of them stood in silence for a moment, looking at the impossible wall. Above them, the rest of the excavation team continued working, unaware of what their leaders were discussing. "We need to go deeper," Jake decided. "But we don't tell the others about the age dating yet. Not until we understand what we're dealing with." Meanwhile, thousands of light years away, Ambassador Kethvar of the Zephyrian Empire was having his own problems. His communication officers had intercepted strange transmissions from human space, including fragments of data from an archaeological dig. Kethvar's forearms moved nervously as he read the reports. The Zephyrians had been watching humanity since they joined the galactic community 50 years ago. Humans claimed to be a young species, new to space travel, eager to learn from their older galactic neighbors. But these intercepted transmissions told a different story. The data fragments mentioned ancient human structures and impossible dating results. Kethvar had lived for 300 years, and he had never heard of humans existing before their official first contact. "Summon the Intelligence Council," he ordered his aide. "We need to know what the humans are hiding." Back on Kepler 442c, Jake's team had made another discovery. Using ground-penetrating scanners, they found that the structure extended far underground. What they thought was a small building was actually the top of something massive. "Commander, the scans show corridors and chambers stretching down at least 200 feet, reported Tony, their lead engineer. "This isn't just a building. It's a complex, maybe even a city." Jake made the decision to use their industrial diggers. Within hours, they had cleared a path to what looked like an entrance. The metal doors were sealed, but when Lisa placed her hand on a panel next to them, light suddenly flickered on. "How did you know to do that?" Ryan asked. Lisa looked confused. "I don't know. It just felt right." The doors slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a corridor that stretched into darkness. Emergency lighting activated as they stepped inside, revealing walls covered in more of the strange, human-like writing. As they walked deeper into the facility, their handheld scanners began picking up energy readings. Something down here was still active after thousands of years. They found the first chamber after walking for 10 minutes. It was enormous, with a domed ceiling that disappeared into shadows above them. Banks of computers lined the walls, their screens dark but humming with power. In the center of the room stood a circular platform with what looked like a star map projected above it. Jake recognized some of the star patterns, but others were completely unknown. "This shows human colonies," Lisa whispered, pointing at glowing dots scattered across the projection. "But look at the dates." Jake followed her finger to symbols that, when translated, showed dates going back 8,000 years. The map showed human settlements across hundreds of star systems, many in areas where no human had ever been. "This has to be wrong," Ryan said. "Humans evolved on Earth. We have the fossil record to prove it." But as they explored more of the facility, they found more evidence that challenged everything they thought they knew. Storage rooms filled with technology that was clearly human in design, but far more advanced than anything in current use. Genetic laboratories with samples, labeled in ancient human languages. And everywhere, the same impossible dates. The most disturbing discovery came when Lisa found a room filled with what looked like sleeping chambers. Hundreds of them, arranged in neat rows. Most were empty and covered in dust, but scanners showed they had been used recently in galactic terms. "Jake," Lisa called from across the room. "These chambers, they're designed for human physiology, and according to the readings, some of them were occupied as recently as 1,000 years ago. On the galactic capital world of Nexus Prime, the Galactic Council was receiving reports that made their various forms of blood run cold. Similar discoveries were being reported from 12 different star systems. Ancient structures clearly built by humans, predating known galactic civilization. The Vorthak hegemony's representative, War Chief Graktor, slammed his massive fist on the council table. "The humans have been lying to us from the beginning. They are not the innocent newcomers they pretend to be." Ambassador Zurmoth of the Ethereal Collective raised a concern that made everyone uncomfortable. If humans had this level of technology thousands of years ago, what happened to it? And more importantly, where did it go? Back in the facility, Jake's team had found what looked like a central computer core. When Lisa approached it, the screens suddenly came to life, displaying text in what appeared to be ancient human languages. "It's responding to us," she said in amazement, "like it's been waiting for humans to return." The computer began displaying images and data that told an impossible story. Humans hadn't just had colonies thousands of years ago. They had ruled a vast empire that spanned the galaxy, and then, for reasons the initial data didn't explain, they had simply disappeared. Jake felt a chill run down his spine as he realized what they had discovered. Humanity wasn't a young species learning to navigate galactic politics. They were the return of something ancient and powerful that had once controlled everything. And if these computers were still working after all this time, what else might still be out there, waiting to wake up? Dr. Elena Rodriguez had always been good with genetics, but what she was seeing in her laboratory aboard the research vessel made her question everything she knew about human biology. The DNA samples from the ancient facility didn't match anything in the standard human genome database, yet they were definitely human. "Computer, run the analysis again," she said for the 5th time. The results came back the same. The genetic markers from the ancient samples contained sequences that existed in modern human DNA but were completely inactive. It was like finding a library of books written in a language nobody remembered how to read. Elena called up the genetic profiles of everyone on the expedition team. What she found made her hands shake. Every single person carried the dormant sequences, but in different combinations. Jake had markers that seemed linked to leadership and tactical thinking. Lisa had sequences that appeared connected to archaeological and historical knowledge. Tony had genetic patterns that matched advanced engineering concepts. "It's like we're all carrying pieces of a puzzle," she whispered to herself. Captain Matt Henderson was having the strangest dreams of his life. Every night since they had entered the ancient facility, his sleep was filled with visions that felt more real than memories. He saw vast cities floating in space, ships the size of moons moving between stars, and technologies that made current human engineering look like stone tools. In the dreams, he wasn't Matt Henderson, security captain from Earth. He was someone else, someone who understood how to operate weapons and defenses that could protect entire star systems. The knowledge felt natural, like remembering how to ride a bike after years of not practicing. When he woke up, fragments of the dreams stayed with him. He found himself looking at the team's defensive equipment and knowing instinctively how to improve it. During yesterday's patrol, he had spotted potential ambush sites that his training had never taught him to recognize. "Sir, are you feeling all right?" asked Corporal Betty Kane, one of his security team members. "You've been acting different since we went into that facility." Matt realized she was right. He was acting different, but he felt more like himself than he ever had before. "Have you been having strange dreams, Betty?" She looked surprised. "Actually, yes, sir. Dreams about fighting in battles I've never been in, using weapons I've never seen. It's like watching movies, except I know how everything works." Other crew members were reporting similar experiences. The ship's cook, Danny Lopez, had started preparing meals using spice combinations he'd never heard of, but somehow knew would taste perfect. Communications officer Carol White was unconsciously adjusting their equipment to frequencies that shouldn't work, but somehow improved their signal range dramatically. Back on Nexus Prime, the Galactic Council was in emergency session. Intelligence. Reports were flooding in from across known space, and none of them were good news for galactic peace of mind. "The humans have installations on 47 worlds," reported Intelligence Director Veltar of the Centauri Union. "Not recent installations, ancient ones. Our archaeological teams estimate they're between 5 and 10,000 years old." The assembled representatives sat in stunned silence. The Galactic Council had been formed 3,000 years ago when the oldest known spacefaring species had finally achieved interstellar communication. The idea that humans had been traveling between stars for twice that long was terrifying. "What's worse," continued Veltar, "is that many of these installations are still active. They've been running on automatic for millennia, disguised as natural phenomena or minor industrial sites. We've been living next to human technology for centuries without knowing it." War Chief Graktor of the Vorthak hegemony stood up, his massive frame towering over the other delegates. "This proves what I have been saying. The humans are not innocent. They have been watching us, studying us, preparing for something." Ambassador Kethvar tried to maintain diplomatic calm, but his voice carried clear worry. "We need to consider the possibility that humanity's integration into galactic society 50 years ago was not their first contact with us. It may have been their return." On Kepler 442c, Professor Dan Kelly was experiencing something that went far beyond strange dreams. He had volunteered to interface directly with the ancient computer system, hoping to unlock more information about human history. What happened instead changed everything. The moment he placed his hands on the interface panels, information began flowing directly into his mind. Not just data, but memories that belonged to people who had lived thousands of years ago. He saw the rise of the ancient human empire, their expansion across the galaxy, and their interactions with younger species. The ancient humans hadn't been conquerors. They had been teachers and protectors, helping other species develop technology and form their own civilizations. But something had gone wrong. The younger species had become aggressive, fighting wars that threatened to destroy everything the ancient humans had built. So humanity had made a choice that no other species would have made. Instead of using their superior technology to force peace, they had voluntarily stepped back. They had put themselves into a long sleep, leaving only automated systems to watch over the galaxy and wait for the right time to return. The sleep was supposed to last until the galaxy achieved balance, Dan said aloud, though his voice sounded strange even to himself. But the balance never came. The conflicts kept growing. The automated systems are designed to wake us up if the galaxy heads toward total war. Jake and Lisa watched in amazement as Dan's eyes glowed with a soft blue light that matched the computer displays. He was still Dan, but he was also something more. The knowledge of the ancients was flowing through him. "Dan, what happened to the ancient humans?" Lisa asked. "They didn't disappear," Dan replied, his voice carrying knowledge that wasn't his own. "They spread across the galaxy and went into deep sleep, becoming the genetic foundation for what you call modern humanity. Every human alive today is a descendant of the ancient empire. We're not just related to them, we are them." The implications hit Jake like a physical blow. That's why Lisa could operate the door controls, why Matt and the others are having dreams about ancient battles, why Elena is finding dormant genetic sequences in our DNA. The facility is designed to activate those sequences, Dan confirmed. It's been scanning everyone who enters, identifying genetic patterns and beginning the awakening process. We're starting to remember who we really are. Elena's voice came over the communications system from the ship above. Commander, you need to see what I'm finding up here. The genetic activation isn't just happening to our team. I'm getting reports from human settlements across this sector. People are reporting strange dreams, new abilities, knowledge they shouldn't have. The ancient systems weren't just affecting the people in the facility. They were broadcasting some kind of signal that was reaching every human in the region, slowly awakening genetic memories that had been dormant for thousands of years. On the galactic capital, emergency alarms were sounding as reports came in of unusual activity in human space. Space traffic control was detecting energy signatures that didn't match any known human technology. Ships were changing course without filing flight plans, heading toward coordinates that weren't in any navigation database. It's starting, whispered Ambassador Zermoth of the Ethereal Collective. Whatever the humans have been preparing for, it's beginning. War Chief Graktor was already activating his private communications channel to the Vorthak fleet commanders. Assemble the Armada. If humanity is waking up from some ancient sleep, we need to strike before they fully remember how to use their old weapons. But in the depths of the ancient facility, Dan Kelly was learning that the Vorthak fears were exactly what the ancient humans had hoped to prevent. The automated systems had been designed to respond to galactic aggression. The more the other species prepared for war with humanity, the faster the awakening process would accelerate. They're making the same mistake the ancient species made, Dan said sadly. They're responding to fear with violence, and that's exactly what will trigger humanity's full awakening. The ancients built fail-safes to prevent galactic war, but those fail-safes can only be activated by humans who remember how to use them. Jake felt a chill of understanding. You're saying that if the galaxy tries to attack us, we'll automatically wake up with enough power to stop them, not just stop them, Dan replied. The ancients designed these systems to restore balance to the galaxy by any means necessary. If peaceful solutions fail, the awakened humans will have access to technology that could reshape entire star systems. As if responding to his words, new displays activated throughout the facility, showing star maps with thousands of installations coming online across human space. The ancient empire wasn't just awakening on Kepler 442c. It was awakening everywhere, and the galaxy was about to discover that humanity had never really been gone at all. President Karen Walsh had never felt more alone than she did walking into the great assembly hall of the Galactic Council on Nexus Prime. The massive chamber could hold representatives from 1,000 worlds, and today it seemed like every seat was filled. She could feel the weight of their stares as she took her place at the defendant's podium. Admiral Steve Cooper and diplomat Claire Thompson flanked her, both trying to look confident despite the obvious hostility in the room. None of them fully understood why they had been summoned with such urgency, though the reports from Jake's expedition had given them some troubling hints. President Walsh, announced Grand Arbiter Zermoth, his ethereal form floating above the central platform. You stand before this council accused of deceiving the entire galactic community about humanity's true nature and intentions. Karen kept her voice steady. Honored Arbiter, humanity has always been truthful in our dealings with the Galactic Council. We joined this community in good faith 50 years ago as a young species seeking to learn from our more experienced neighbors. War Chief Graktor rose from his seat, his massive form bristling with barely contained aggression. Lies. We have evidence that humans possessed advanced civilization thousands of years before any known galactic species achieved spaceflight. The main display screens around the chamber lit up with images that made Karen's blood run cold. Archaeological sites from 17 different star systems, all showing clear signs of ancient human habitation, structures that predated the Galactic Council itself by millennia. These installations have been hidden throughout our territory, continued Graktor, watching us, studying us, preparing for the day when humanity would reveal its true power and resume its ancient dominance. Claire Thompson stepped forward. Honored representatives, if such installations exist, humanity's current government knows nothing about them. Our historical records show continuous development from a single world, Earth, with no evidence of ancient galactic civilization. Then explain this, said Intelligence Director Veltar, activating another display. This one showed energy readings from across human space, massive power signatures that had appeared seemingly overnight. Your territories are lighting up with technology that shouldn't exist. Ships are moving according to flight patterns that follow ancient navigation routes.
No living human should know.
Karen felt her stomach drop as she recognized some of the energy signatures from Steve's preliminary reports. Whatever Jake's team had found on Kepler 442c was apparently happening everywhere in human space. Meanwhile, back on the archaeological site, Professor Dan Kelly was experiencing visions that revealed the full scope of what was happening. The ancient human empire hadn't just been advanced, it had been vast beyond imagination. What the current galaxy considered to be the known universe had been merely the outer provinces of human territory. Jake, you need to understand what we're dealing with, Dan said, his consciousness still partially connected to the ancient data systems. The humans who went to sleep weren't just one species. They were the result of thousands of years of genetic and technological evolution. They had transcended the normal limitations of biology and physics. Lisa Morgan was studying the star charts that the facility continued to display. These maps show human presence in sectors we've never even explored. Some of these star systems aren't in any of our navigation databases. Because they're not in this galaxy, Dan replied, causing everyone in the chamber to freeze. The ancient human empire spanned multiple galaxies. What we call human space today is just the small corner they chose as a nursery for the younger species. Tony, their engineer, was examining some of the technology they had uncovered. Dan, these power systems, they're not just advanced. They're operating on principles that our physics says should be impossible. Matter conversion, dimensional storage, instantaneous communication across galactic distances. The ancients didn't just understand the universe, Dan explained. They learned to reshape it. When they decided to step back and let the younger species develop, they had to suppress most of their own capabilities to avoid accidentally interfering. But the suppression had always been temporary. The ancient systems had been designed to gradually reactivate if the galaxy showed signs of heading toward total war. The growing aggression between species, the military buildups, the fear and mistrust, all of it was triggering protocols that had been dormant for millennia. On Nexus Prime, the emergency session was becoming increasingly heated. Ambassador Kethvar was trying to maintain some semblance of diplomatic order, but representatives from dozens of species were demanding action against humanity. The question before us, announced Grand Arbiter Zermoth, is whether humanity represents an immediate threat to galactic security. War Chief Graktor has requested authorization to launch a preemptive strike against human installations before they become fully operational. President Walsh felt her heart racing. Honored Arbiter, humanity seeks only peace. We have no intention of threatening any member of this council. Peace built on deception is no peace at all, growled the representative from the crystalline hegemony. How can we trust a species that has hidden its true nature for generations? Admiral Steve Cooper tried to interject. Our military forces pose no threat to the combined might of the galactic community. Even if the archaeological discoveries are accurate, that was ancient history. Modern humanity has no access to such technologies. But even as he spoke, reports were coming in that contradicted his words. Human ships across the galaxy were suddenly displaying capabilities that exceeded their supposed design specifications. Defensive installations that had been thought inactive for decades were powering up with energy levels that defied known physics. Your ships are already changing, accused Intelligence Director Veltar. Our monitoring stations have detected massive energy surges from human vessels. Ships that were rated for simple cargo transport are now showing weapon and defensive capabilities that rival our best military designs. The truth was that the humans aboard those ships were as surprised as anyone. Captain Tony Miller, commanding a routine supply vessel near the human colony of New Tokyo, was staring at his control displays in amazement. Systems that had never existed before were coming online, and somehow he knew exactly how to operate them. "Navigation, set course for the Kepler sector," he ordered, though he couldn't explain why he knew they needed to be there. Navigator Beth Carter's hands moved over controls that shouldn't have existed. "Course plotted, sir. Estimated arrival. Time, 14 hours using standard drive." She paused, looking at readouts that made no sense. "Sir, we also have the option of arriving in 2 hours using something called dimensional fold technology." Captain Miller knew he should have been terrified, but instead he felt a strange sense of coming home. "Engage dimensional fold. All crew, this is the captain. We're about to remember something we forgot a long time ago." Similar scenes were playing out on human ships throughout the galaxy. Technologies were activating that no living human had built, but that every human somehow knew how to use. It was as if an entire species was waking up from a very long dream. Back in the council chamber, War Chief Graktor was pressing his case for immediate military action. "Every moment we delay gives the humans more time to activate their ancient weapons. We must strike now while they are still in transition." "And what if you're wrong?" asked Ambassador Zormoth. "What if attacking them only accelerates whatever process is already underway?" "Then we die fighting instead of die waiting," Graktor replied. "At least our children will know we tried to defend them." President Walsh realized that the situation was spiraling beyond any hope of diplomatic solution. The fear in the chamber was palpable, and fear had a way of making rational beings do irrational things. "Honored representatives," she said, her voice carrying across the vast chamber, "if humanity truly possessed the power you fear, would we not have used it already? Would we have spent 50 years learning your languages, studying your cultures, trying to fit into your society?" "Perhaps that was reconnaissance," suggested the Aquatic Federation's representative. "Learning our weaknesses before revealing your strength." Claire Thompson tried one last diplomatic approach. "What would convince you of humanity's peaceful intentions?" The chamber fell silent for a long moment before War Chief Graktor provided the answer that everyone was thinking. "Complete disarmament of all human territories and submission to galactic oversight. Prove your peaceful intentions by giving up any ability to threaten us." President Walsh knew that such terms would be unacceptable to any sovereign species, which was probably the point. The Galactic Council wasn't looking for reassurance. They were looking for justification for the military action they had already decided upon. On Kepler 442c, Dan Kelly's connection to the ancient systems was showing him exactly what was happening in the council chamber. The awakening process was accelerating in response to the growing threat, just as the ancients had designed it to do. "Jake," he said urgently, "you need to contact President Walsh immediately. The council is about to authorize an attack on human space, and that's going to trigger responses they're not prepared for." War Chief Graktor stood before the assembled fleet commanders in the massive war room aboard his flagship. The holographic display showed the largest armada ever assembled in galactic history, over 10,000 ships from 17 different species, all converging on the edge of human space. "Today we prevent the return of the ancient enemy," Graktor announced to his officers. "Intelligence confirms that human installations across 47 systems are activating ancient technologies. If we allow them to complete this process, the galaxy will once again bow to human dominance." Admiral Vexhai of the Crystalline Hegemony stepped forward. "War Chief, our combined fleet represents the military might of half the known galaxy. Surely no ancient technology can stand against such force." "Do not underestimate what we face," Graktor replied grimly. "The archaeological evidence suggests the ancient humans possessed technologies that could manipulate matter at the quantum level, fold space-time, and draw energy directly from stellar cores. We must strike before they remember how to use such weapons." The fleet had been assembled in secret over the past week, using back-channel communications to avoid detection by galactic intelligence networks. Each species had contributed their most advanced warships, creating an armada that could have conquered any known civilization. Colonel Amy Foster was having a perfectly ordinary morning at Outpost Delta 7, a routine monitoring station on the outer edge of human territory. She was reviewing supply requisitions and personnel reports when her sensor operator, Lieutenant Carl Wright, called out in alarm. "Colonel, I'm detecting massive energy signatures approaching our position. Multiple ships, sir. Thousands of them. Amy moved to the main display, expecting to see some kind of sensor malfunction. Instead, she saw a wall of hostile ships stretching across 3 sectors of space. The computer was identifying vessel types from 17 different species, all armed and moving in battle formation. "This has got to be a mistake," she said. "There's no way that many ships could approach our territory without triggering early warning systems." "Ma'am, they did trigger the early warning systems," Lieutenant Wright replied, his voice tight with worry. 3 hours ago, but the alerts were automatically classified and routed to something called Ancient Protocol Response Network. I've never heard of that system before. Amy felt a chill run down her spine. "Get me a direct line to Fleet Command, emergency priority." But before Lieutenant Wright could establish the connection, something impossible happened. The outpost's defensive systems came online by themselves. Amy watched in amazement as weapon batteries she had never seen before emerged from what she had thought were simple communications arrays. "Colonel, the base computer is requesting authorization to activate Ancient Defense Protocol 7, reported Sergeant Linda Hayes from the tactical station. "The system is asking for your genetic confirmation." Amy had no idea what Ancient Defense Protocol 7 was, but when she placed her hand on the scanner, she suddenly knew exactly what to do. Information flowed through her mind, knowledge that felt both foreign and completely natural. She understood that Outpost Delta 7 wasn't just a monitoring station. It was a fortress that had been disguised as a simple facility, waiting for the day when human space needed to be defended. "Activate all defensive systems," she ordered, her voice carrying authority she didn't know she possessed. "Begin power-up sequence for planetary shield generators." "Ma'am, we don't have planetary shield generators," Sergeant Hayes replied, but even as she spoke, massive structures were rising from beneath the outpost's foundation. On Earth, General Pete Robinson was dealing with his own impossible situation. Military installations worldwide were spontaneously activating systems that no human engineer had ever designed. Ships that had been in dry dock for maintenance were suddenly spaceworthy and showing capabilities that exceeded their blueprints by orders of magnitude. "Sir, we're getting reports from every military facility on the planet," reported his aide, Major Frank Hill. "Equipment is upgrading itself. Soldiers are reporting knowledge of weapons and tactics they've never been trained on. And sir, our satellites are detecting the approach of what appears to be a hostile fleet." General Robinson had served in the military for 30 years, but nothing in his experience had prepared him for this. "How many ships are we talking about, Major?" "Current count shows over 10,000 vessels, sir. They'll reach the outer defense perimeter in 6 hours. The general knew that humanity's current military forces couldn't possibly stand against such an armada. Earth's entire space fleet consisted of maybe 200 ships, most of them designed for patrol duty rather than large-scale combat. But as reports continued to come in, it became clear that humanity's military capabilities were not what they had appeared to be. Ships that had been rated for simple cargo transport were revealing hidden weapon systems. Space stations thought to be civilian facilities were activating defensive arrays that had somehow been concealed for decades. Captain Tony Miller was experiencing the most surreal day of his career. His supply vessel, the Peaceful Commerce, had transformed into something that belonged in a science fiction movie rather than reality. The cargo bay had reconfigured itself into a command center. His navigation systems now displayed star charts he had never seen, and his crew somehow knew how to operate technology that shouldn't have existed. "Captain, we're receiving a fleet coordination signal," reported Navigator Beth Carter. "It's directing us to rendezvous with 73 other vessels at coordinates that aren't in our database." "Do we have any idea what's happening?" asked Engineer Kevin Hayes from his station. "Because our power core is showing output levels that should be physically impossible." Captain Miller realized he did know what was happening, though he couldn't explain how. "We're remembering, Kevin. Humanity is remembering what we used to be." The rendezvous point turned out to be an empty region of space that wasn't empty at all. As the human ships arrived, massive structures began materializing around them. Space stations the size of cities, weapons platforms that dwarfed anything in known military databases, and defensive installations that seemed to bend space around themselves. "My God," whispered Beth Carter. How long have these been here? They've always been here, Captain Miller replied, knowledge flowing through him that belonged to someone else. We just forgot how to see them. Meanwhile, the approaching alien armada was beginning to realize that they might have made a serious miscalculation. Long-range sensors were detecting energy readings from human space that didn't match any known technology. What had appeared to be lightly defended territory was revealing itself to be something far more dangerous. Admiral Vexhai contacted War Chief Graktor with growing concern. War Chief, our sensor arrays are detecting massive defensive installations throughout human territory. These readings suggest weapons capabilities that exceed our most optimistic projections. Impossible, Graktor replied. Human military technology is centuries behind our own. They possess no weapons that could threaten this fleet. Sir, with respect, I'm not detecting human military technology. I'm detecting something else entirely. Energy signatures that suggest manipulation of fundamental forces, defensive shields that appear to be bending space-time itself. War Chief Graktor studied the sensor data with growing unease. What his fleet was approaching didn't look like the territory of a young species learning to navigate galactic politics. It looked like the border of an empire that had been pretending to be harmless. Back on Kepler 442c, Professor Dan Kelly was watching the approaching confrontation through the ancient facility's sensor networks. His connection to the awakening systems showed him the full scope of what was happening across human space. Jake, you need to understand what the aliens are about to encounter, Dan said urgently. The defensive systems activating across human territory aren't just weapons. They're reality-altering technologies that the ancients built to protect the galaxy from itself. What do you mean? Jake asked, though the facility's displays were showing him ship movements and energy patterns that made his head spin. The ancient humans didn't just have better guns, Dan explained. They had weapons that could rewrite the laws of physics in localized space. When they went into hibernation, they left behind automated systems designed to prevent galactic wars by making them impossible to fight. Lisa Morgan was studying the tactical displays with growing horror. Dan, are you saying that if this fleet attacks human space, they're going to encounter weapons that can literally change how reality works? Worse than that, Dan replied. The systems are designed to escalate proportionally to the threat they face. A small raiding party might encounter conventional defenses, but a fleet of 10,000 ships representing half the galaxy's military might, that's going to trigger responses that could reshape entire star systems. The ancient defensive protocols weren't just designed to protect humanity. They were designed to protect the galaxy from the kind of total war that had nearly destroyed everything 10,000 years ago. And the approaching alien armada, assembled out of fear and misunderstanding, was about to trigger safeguards that would make their worst fears about human power look like children's nightmares. The moment War Chief Graktor's fleet crossed into human territory, every human being in the galaxy felt something change inside their minds. Captain Tony Miller, still trying to understand how his cargo ship had become a vessel of impossible capabilities, suddenly found himself remembering things that had happened thousands of years before he was born. Navigator, adjust course to intercept the lead enemy vessels, he ordered, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had commanded fleets across multiple galaxies. Engineering, bring the reality anchors online. Beth Carter's hands moved across controls that had materialized moments before, operating technology she had never seen but somehow understood perfectly. Reality anchors online, sir. Space-time stabilization field is active across our sector. Engineer Kevin Hayes was staring at readouts that showed his ship drawing power directly from the quantum vacuum itself. Captain, our energy core is tapping into dimensional fold space. We have essentially unlimited power. Across human space, similar transformations were occurring. Every human was remembering their true heritage, but it wasn't just memory. The genetic sequences that Dr. Elena Rodriguez had discovered were activating changing human biology in real time, enhanced reflexes, expanded consciousness, and the ability to interface directly with technologies that operated on principles beyond current science. Fleet Admiral Gary Johnson found himself in command of a force that hadn't existed an hour earlier. Hundreds of ships were converging on his position, Not just human vessels, but ancient constructs that had been hidden throughout the galaxy for millennia. Space stations the size of small moons were decloaking, revealing defensive capabilities that could protect entire star systems. "All vessels, this is Admiral Johnson," he broadcast on channels that reached every human ship simultaneously. "We are not conquerors returning to reclaim an empire. We are guardians awakening to restore balance to a galaxy that has forgotten how to live in peace." The alien armada was discovering that their carefully planned attack was encountering defenses that operated outside normal physics. War Chief Graktor watched in horror as his lead ship simply stopped moving when they entered human defensive zones. Not destroyed, not damaged, but frozen in space, as if time itself had been suspended around them. "Weapons, fire on the nearest human installation," Graktor ordered. The energy beams from his flagship's main guns simply vanished when they reached the human defensive perimeter. The weapons had fired, the energy had left the ship, but it ceased to exist the moment it encountered human space. "War Chief, our weapons are having no effect," reported his tactical officer. "The energy is being absorbed or redirected by some kind of spatial distortion field." Admiral Vexhigh's voice crackled over the communications channel. "Graktor, we need to withdraw immediately. My sensors are detecting fundamental changes in space-time throughout this region. The humans aren't just using advanced technology, they're rewriting the laws of physics." But withdrawal was no longer possible. Human ships were appearing around the alien fleet, not approaching from a distance but materializing directly from what appeared to be empty space. These weren't the simple vessels the galaxy had known humans to possess, but constructs of living metal that seemed to reshape themselves as needed. Captain Tony Miller's ship approached the alien flagship, and he found himself speaking directly to War Chief Graktor through some form of instantaneous communication that bypassed normal radio channels. "War Chief, I understand your fear," Tony said, his voice carrying compassion despite the circumstances. "Your species remembers stories of the Ancient Ones, and you're terrified that we've returned to dominate the galaxy again." Graktor's response was filled with desperate aggression. "You deceived us all. You pretended to be a young species while hiding technology that makes our greatest weapons look like children's toys." "We didn't deceive you," Tony replied sadly. "We genuinely didn't. Remember who we were? The ancient humans designed it that way. They went into hibernation specifically to avoid the temptation of ruling through superior force. On Nexus Prime, the Galactic Council was watching their worst fears come to life. The main display showed the alien fleet completely surrounded by human forces that had appeared seemingly from nowhere. But more terrifying than the military situation were the reports coming in from across the galaxy. Human colonies that had seemed primitive and harmless were revealing themselves to be nodes in a vast network of advanced installations. Technologies were activating that could manipulate matter at the atomic level, communicate instantaneously across galactic distances, and apparently bend space and time to human will. Ambassador Zurmoth floated before the emergency assembly, his ethereal form flickering with distress. "Fellow representatives, we are witnessing the return of a power that once ruled the galaxy. The question now is whether we can find a way to coexist with beings who possess such capabilities." In the depths of the ancient facility on Kepler 442c, Professor Dan Kelly was experiencing the full awakening of ancient human consciousness. He was still himself, but he was also connected to the collective memory of a civilization that had spanned multiple galaxies and existed for tens of thousands of years. "Jake, I can see everything now," Dan said, his eyes glowing with the same blue light as the ancient computers. The humans who went to sleep weren't just advanced, they were transcendent. They had evolved beyond the need for physical matter, beyond the limitations of single planets or even single galaxies. Jake Sullivan watched his friend with a mixture of awe and fear. "Dan, are you still you?" "I'm more me than I've ever been," Dan replied. "The ancient knowledge isn't replacing who I am. It's showing me who I was always meant to become. Every human carries this potential, Jake. We're not just descendants of the Ancient Ones. We are the Ancient Ones, awakening from a very long dream." Lisa Morgan was studying the displays that now showed activity across hundreds of star systems. "The scope of this is incredible," Human installations are coming online throughout the galaxy, but they're not military bases. They're research stations, terraforming facilities, and what look like schools or academies. The ancients weren't just warriors, Dan explained. They were teachers, scientists, and gardeners of civilization. When they dominated the galaxy, it wasn't through conquest but through sharing knowledge and fostering growth in younger species. But that ancient benevolence was being tested by the current crisis. The automated defense systems were designed to protect not just humanity but the galaxy itself from the destructive potential of total war. The alien fleet's attack was triggering responses that could reshape entire regions of space. Fleet Admiral Gary Johnson found himself making decisions that would affect the course of galactic history. The ancient systems were offering him options that ranged from simply disabling the attacking fleet to fundamentally altering the biological and technological development of every species involved. "Communications, open a channel to all ships in the alien fleet," he ordered. "This is Admiral Johnson of the awakened human fleet. Your attack has activated defense protocols that were designed to prevent galactic war by any means necessary. I'm offering you one chance to withdraw peacefully." War Chief Graktor's response was predictable. "We will not surrender to human dominance. Our species fought for freedom once before, and we will fight again." Admiral Johnson felt the weight of ancient responsibility settling on his shoulders. "War Chief, you misunderstand our purpose. We don't seek dominance, we seek balance. But if you continue this attack, the automated systems will implement solutions that neither of us wants to see." The ancient defensive protocols were already analyzing the galactic situation and preparing comprehensive responses. The systems had determined that the current conflict was a symptom of deeper problems in galactic civilization. Species were too aggressive, too territorial, too willing to choose violence over cooperation. The defense systems were prepared to solve these problems by making aggression impossible, but the solutions would fundamentally change what it meant to be a sentient species in this galaxy. On Earth, Dr. Elena Rodriguez was monitoring the genetic changes occurring in human populations worldwide. The awakening wasn't just affecting individuals, it was creating a new form of collective consciousness that linked every human being into a vast network of shared knowledge and purpose. The ancient humans didn't just have advanced technology, she reported to General Robinson. They had evolved beyond individual consciousness into something like a collective intelligence that maintained individual identity while sharing collective wisdom. As the standoff in space continued, Ambassador Linda Wright materialized in the Galactic Council chamber through some form of transportation technology that bypassed normal space-time. She appeared calm and composed, but her presence radiated an authority that made every representative in the chamber feel like children in the presence of an adult. "Honored representatives," Linda said, her voice reaching every being in the chamber, despite the lack of any visible communication device. "I come to offer the same choice that the ancient ones offered 10,000 years ago. The galaxy can choose cooperation and growth under human guidance, or it can continue down the path of conflict and face the consequences.